Where are we starting?
Okay, today's daf is Masechta Bava Daf Samach Dalet, but basically, I just want to go over the Mishnah, which is on Daf Samach Amud Beis. Okay, just to go over the Mishnah so that we get up to speed where we are. It's very simple. The Mishnah in the Torah, it says you're not allowed to take interest, right? That's midaraisa. So that's Issa daraisa. That's her essay. It's not just on the lender, but it's also on the borrower to give interest. So that's Isser. But the Chachamim also said there's some things that are called ribis d'Rabbanan, interest d'Rabbanan, that it's asur d'Rabbanan to do, because it looks like ribis d'Oraisa. So ribis d'Oraisa is very simple. So let's just do the Mishnah. Ezehu neshach, what is called ribis d'Oraisa? That's called neshach. Neshach means it bites. It gives a bite out of the borrower. If you have a high interest, and you always, you want to get rid of it because you always just can't make the end payments. So it's ribis d'Oraisa. The ezehu, what would be considered tarbis, ribis d'Rabbanan. Okay, in the language of the Mishnah, tarbis is called ribis d'Rabbanan. So ezehu neshech, what is called ribis d'Oraisa? That you're familiar. It's set up in the loan documents. Hamal v'sela, he lends 4. Sela is 4 dinrim, right? 4. And behei dinner, and he expects 5 dinner in return. Or he lends, doesn't have to be money. So sayim chitim, he lends 2 saw of chitim. So sayim is 2, and he expects b'shalish, he expects 3 saw of wheat return. Also, that's also in the Torah. Neishu naishach, that bites the borrower. Now, ezehu tarbis, what is called increase, which is iser d'Rabbanan. Hamarber peperis, someone who has to increase peris because you fronted him the money. Now, we could understand that not everything is a loan. There's a possibility, let's say, you pay for an item and only receive it later on, with the expectation is that you get a discount, and the other guy has to add on to the normal price, to the normal food amount that he owes you, because you fronted him the money early on. So let's Ketzad. Lokach hebenu chitim b'dinar zav hakor. Let's say you bought with a dinar zav is, let's say, 25, that's a good way to remember, 25 dinar kesef, okay? That 25 dinar kesef hakor, you get 30 saw for 25 silver coins, okay? 25 silver coins. And that's the price. If you look up in the newspaper, in the Wall Street Journal, that's the rate of a kur, a 30 saw of wheat. You have to pay 25 dinrim. But amdu achitim belama dinrim. But when you didn't get the chitim, the purchaser didn't get the chitim. So now, when he wants to take the wheat, in order to get a kur, you would have to pay 30 dinrim, not 25 dinrim. So the price of wheat got more expensive. So that's not a problem. The reason that's not a problem, if you would take wheat, that's not a problem, because once you purchase the wheat, it's as if you own the wheat. And even if the guy doesn't have it to sell, but there's a known price, he could always go to the market and buy the wheat. So it's almost, when we consider it as if the purchaser purchased the wheat. So when the wheat goes up in value, it's the purchaser that didn't get ribis. It's not that the seller is giving more. It's the purchaser's investment went up in value. But here's where the problem comes. The guy says, the purchaser says, okay, can I have my wheat? Because he indicates, I don't want wheat now. I want to sell the wheat and buy wine with it. Oh, so his real intention is to buy wine. So what does the seller do? The seller doesn't have wheat, and he does have wine. He doesn't have even wine. But he knows the purchaser wants wine. So Amallah, he says like this: I owe you 30 dinrim of wheat, which is a core, right? In other words, I owe you a core of wheat, which is 30 dinrim. So that's like a loan. I still owe you that. I don't have the wheat and I don't have the wine. I have, you want wine. So I'm going to go buy wine and give you the wine instead of the wheat, 30 dinrim worth of wine. and he doesn't have the wine. So in that case, that would be considered ribis. Why? Because the fact that he didn't pay the wheat, it turns it into a loan. It turns it into a loan. And now the seller has a loan, an outstanding debt to the purchaser. And really, he only got 25 dinar as a loan. And now he owes 30. And if he turns it into wine, he's actually doing ribis d'Rabbanan. And so the reason why it's called ribis d'Rabbanan is simply because it's not in the actual, it's not a real loan. It came in a mekach hamemker, in a transaction type of scenario. And it was fronted the money. So, and it wasn't set up in price. It wasn't, you're going to pay me more by X amount. So we didn't know how much the increase in wheat will happen. So therefore, it's only Isser Ribis Rabbanan. Okay, so I just wanted to go through that Mishnah. So now everything else is simple. So let's go to Daf Samach Daled Amud Aleph. And here we are. And it's all these dafim are short, so it's very easy to follow. Amar Rav Kahana said, we're starting from Samach Daled Amud Aleph, 9 lines from the top. Amar Rav Kahana said, I was sitting in a lecture given by Rav. Okay, Ushmoyes the Kaame Kari. And Rav Kahana admittedly didn't understand what Rav was talking about, but he heard that Rav was talking about gourds, like cucumbers, whatever, gourds. You know what a gourd is? Goards. I have no idea what he was talking about. Basa the Kamrav, but he stayed through the lecture. He didn't walk out of the lecture. Basa the Kamrav, after Rav got up, Amru lahu, I said to the other students, my kari to Kamarav. What was Rav talking about? Gourds, what's that talking about? What was the discussion in the classroom? Amru li, so they told me, Hachi Kamarav. This is what Rav says. Hai man the yav zuzele ginoi akari. Somebody who gives money, let's say he gives a sela. Let's say he's giving money, a sela, to a gardener who raises gourds. The ka'azle, and the price of the gourds are asara. You get 10 gourds, kari, for a sela, b'nei zarta, which are half a amma. In other words, you can get, let's say, you can get it like a 6-inch gourd, 10 of them, for the price of $1. Okay, so the guy goes and wants to front the money to the person selling the gourds, the guy who raises gourds, and now the gourds are in the field. He didn't harvest them yet. V'amalei, and he said to him like this. He said to the purchaser, "You give me the money now, yahivne lach, but when I'm going to give you the gourds, I'm going to give you b'nei garmida. It's going to be bigger. The gourds are going to grow into an amma. It's going to grow to a foot, okay? Right? So it's going to grow. And so I'm fronting the money. I'm going to let the gourds remain in my field, and it's going to grow bigger. And then I'm going to give it to you. So even though normally if you're buying a bigger gourd, you have to pay more money, I'm selling it to you basically at the smaller price. So now I'm selling you at the cheaper price of the gourds that are a half a 6 inches large. So the Gemara says, Rav explained, Isnayu Shari. If he actually had large gourds that he could have actually given to the purchaser right then and there, Shari, that's permitted. Leisnayu, but if he didn't have it, if he only had small gourds in his field, not large ones, then by him taking the money now and having these gourds grow in his field for free to a larger size and then giving it to the purchaser, so that's ribis. Also, that would be asur probably midrabanan. Obviously, it's a business transaction, not a loan, but that would be asur drabanan because he's paying for a small gourds, fronting the money, and he's receiving larger gourds because the seller held on to the money. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that very simple? That's a very straightforward case. What did Rav teach you? What's the novelty? So the Gemara says, I would think to myself that since the gourds eventually grow to that larger size, so it's not like the seller is adding something. It grows naturally by itself to a larger size. So by him accepting the money now, we would not consider it ribis Kamash Malon, it is considered ribis. Now, come on, who is the author? What is Rav? Who is Rav aligning himself with? Ki hai Tana, like the following opinion, like the following Tana, Rav is aligning himself with the following opinion. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, a guy is now follow this case. It's very simple. A man is going to milk his goats. Okay, goat milk, very healthy. Or the ligs is rechelav, or to share his sheep, or v'lildois is kavarte, or to take the honey from his honeycombs. So, and he needs money now. So, v'matzei chavere, and he finds a friend in the street, and he says to him, Amalan, he says like this, I'm making you a bet. Whatever I'm going to yield from this milking of my cows, it could be 5 gallons, it could be 20 gallons. I'm selling it to you for this price. Now, could be the guy's getting a cheaper price because maybe the goats are going to give much more than what he's fronting the money for. But it's possible the milk coming out of the goat is going to be much less. So it's really a bet. Whatever I'm going to share from my sheep, I'm selling it to you. Whatever I'm going to slide and take off from my honeycombs, that's called roida, all that honey, machalach is sold to you. Now the question is, you might be giving me money and getting much more value in return, but it's possible that you're going to get less. So therefore it's not ribis, mutter, because that's really a normal bet. Avo, but im amaloid, mashi easy cholves kach bakach. Whatever my goats are going to give off, if I'm going to get 3 gallons of this milk. Whatever my goats give off, machol lecha is sold to you. Now it could be that you're getting much more. I'm guaranteeing you for the money that you're giving me much more milk than what you're paying for. In other words, you give me money, and I'm giving you much more milk than what the value of milk is right now. Or I'm giving you much more wool for what you're paying for. I'm guaranteeing you, not machalach. There's no bet over here. Whatever I take from my beehive, you have to kach v'kach, machalach is sold to you at a cheaper price. So basically, you're fronting the money for a cheaper price. Then that's usur. That would be usur. Now this would be similar to the case of the gourds, because when let's say by the milk, let's say the goats yielded a smaller amount of milk, but eventually the goats are going to yield more milk, so it's going to grow by itself. Nevertheless, it's usur because the milk that's there, it's right now you don't have that much milk in your goat. You'll have to wait to another cycle till the goat starts yielding more milk. So that's usur, and that's the same thing with the gourds. Right now, the person doesn't have large gourds; he only has small gourds. So by him the seller accepting money in advance, that is called ribis d'Rabbanan, because he has to supply larger gourds. The afagav, even so, the memela koravi, even though it's going to grow by itself, came in the lesnaya behi shata, since you don't have it at that moment, since you're going to have to wait for another cycle for the milk to come into the cow, or for the sheep to grow more wool, so you can supply more wool based on the price that he gave you, the money that he gave you. So therefore, that will be considered usur because you gave money for the seller to hold on to, and now he has to supply you with more produce, more milk, more wool. Based, if you looked at the price when you got the money, when he received the money, now he's going to supply you with much more than what you really paid for, and therefore that's called ribis d'Rabbanan. So that's the same thing with the gourds. Guy gave money for the price of small gourds, and now the seller is going to be forced, because he's holding on to the money. The seller is going to have, the gardener is going to say, I'm giving you in exchange for allowing me to hold on to your money, and I'm going to give you larger gourds. Ikede Amri, others say, Amar Rava said, Kevan de Memela Karavi, since they grow by itself, Shapidami, that's different. Gourds, you leave them in the field, the gourd itself is going to grow into the bigger gourd. The smaller gourd is going to grow into a bigger gourd. So there, the Rava, it seems to argue with Rav and say that would be permitted. But it'll be very different than the Brisa. The Brisa says it's Asr. But didn't the Brisa say Kach v'Kach Asr? It's Asr. So how could Rava argue on a Brisa? We just learned this Brisa seems to align itself with Rav. Rava says it's mutter by the gourds. And says the Gemara, Hassam, there's a very big difference. Over there by the milk, Lavmine Karavi, the milk is not growing. It's the animal that's going to have to produce more milk or more wool. The shakli lehai, you take this milk, and another milk takes its place. So therefore, that is ribis, because you're fronting the money and you're getting much more in return. Hacha over here, in the case of the gourds, binei karavi, it's growing from itself. The shakli lehai when you take away this one, nothing else takes its place. In other words, it's that gourd itself that's growing into a larger size. So therefore, if the seller took money while he only had the gourds, then they were small, and he allowed the gourds to stay in his field so it can grow larger, so he can give to the purchaser a bigger gourd, that's not considered ribis according to Rava. According to Rav, it is. Nu Gemara. Amar Abaya. Abaya said, Shari leila irish lemeima lechavre. Person's allowed to tell his friend, Hey lechabor zuzi achavisa dechamra. A guy makes a bet with his friend. Here's 4 zuz and for your barrel of wine. But he tells the seller, if the wine is sour, I'm not taking responsibility. I don't own this wine. Iyakra izula, but if the price of wine goes up or down in value, right? So then I take that. That's my risk. So he didn't take all the risk associated with the purchase of the wine. Is that considered ribis? Because basically he's fronting the wine, but he doesn't really own the wine. Amalei Rab Shevia Labaya, so Rab Shevia say to Rabaya, we go to Amid Beis, Haikarv l'sacha v'rocha lehefseru. It's another problem. That it means the guy is taking a low risk bet. He's taking most of the reward, and he's distancing himself from the loss, because the total loss, if it went sour, he's not accepting upon himself any of that loss. And we learned to the Brisa, if a person puts on such a show, gives somebody money, and takes very little risk, he's a rasha. That's what ribis is, basically very little risk. You're giving somebody money and you're demanding much more in return. And here he's fronting money and he's not taking any responsibility if the wine goes sour. That's considered a rasha. So, and maybe we consider that not considered a sale, it's more like a loan, and therefore it's very close to ribis. Amalei, so I answered, Kivin the Makabal Zule, Karlazel Zehu. Yes, you can do such a deal because you're not really accepting the loss as it pertains to going sour, but you are taking a price fluctuation loss in the wine. So since he's taking some sort of risk, that's not considered ribis, and that is permitted. New Mishnah. What happens? Hamal bes chaveira. If somebody lends his friend money, lo yoder bechatzera chinam. He cannot live in his friend's courtyard. Let's say he cannot live in his garage for free. You lent the money, now you say, okay, I can live in your courtyard for free. And you can't rent it. You can't rent his garage for less than the value because that's ribis. Because basically you lent the money and now you're expecting him to do you a favor in return by allowing you to at least stay in his courtyard for free, not pay rent, or pay a discounted rent. So that's not permitted. Again, that's a ribis. Amar Rav Yosef bar Menyunui, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Yosef said in the name of Rav Nachman, Afal Pish Amru. He starts off with a statement. Even though we say, Hadar bechatzar chaver shlei medate, somebody who squats. Okay, that's a good buzzword. Someone who stays in the courtyard of his friend without telling him. He just sleeps there, camps out there. He doesn't have to pay rent. The reason is because if this is a type of courtyard that the owner would have never rented out anyway, even though the guy that's squatting there would have normally needed a place to stay, but the person who owns the courtyard doesn't rent it out. So that's a zenehena. One benefits and and the other one didn't lose out. That's permitted. You don't have to pay for it. But if you lent the owner of the courtyard money, and then you start living in his courtyard for free, you have to give him reward. You have to pay for it because that looks like ribis. So it seems that Rav Nachman is just saying, rewording our Mishnah. So that's the Gemara's question. My kamashmala. What's the chiddush of Rav Nachman? Tanina, that's our Mishnah. Hamal bes Chavere, someone who lends his friend money. Lo yoda b'chatzeira chinam. You shouldn't live in your courtyard of your friend for free. And you shouldn't rent it out for a cheaper rent. And they say ribis, that's ribis. Once you lend somebody money, you got to avoid any type of relationship that shows that you're getting something in return. So isn't Rav Nachman telling you the same idea? So the Gemara says like this, not so. If I just have that Mishnah, I would think the when does our Mishnah say it's not permitted? It's a type of courtyard that the borrower would have normally rented out, and the lender is a type of person that needed a place to stay. So he's benefiting from staying in the courtyard for free. But if you have a courtyard that the borrower would have never rented out anyway, it's just staying there. And we're talking about a lender that doesn't need to live in this courtyard. He has another place where to live. So I would think that it's no problem, and that our Mishnah would not hold that it's usher. Komash Malan. That's what Rav Nachman and Rav Yosef, who said in the name of Rav Nachman, teaches you that even though nobody's really benefiting over here and nobody's losing, still that would be usher once you establish a borrower-lender relationship. So that's what the first version. Others say it's now the opposite. Amar Rav Yosef bar Menyume, Amar Rav Nachman, Av Pisha Amar Adar B'Chatzev Shaloi Medata Einu Tzarich Lahalas Schar. It's a little bit different. Not opposite, but even though we say that if you live in the courtyard of your friend, you don't have to pay rent. If he normally would have not rented it out, Helveini V'Dar B'Chatzar. If he said, I'm lending you money, but guarantee me that I can stay in your courtyard, Tzarich Lahalas Le'Sachar. So then you do have to give him, you do have to pay the rent money. You can't get it for free. So the difference between the first version is here, you said the word halveni. You put it in the original loan documents that the part of the condition is that you can get the courtyard for free. And in the first version, it's hilva'o. If you already did it already, can you live in the courtyard for free? So that's the two differences between the languages. So mandi yama hilva'o, the first version that said that if it wasn't even part of the original condition of the loan, it just happened to be after the loan, the lender decided he wants to live in the courtyard of his friend. So that if that's asar kol shkein halveni, certainly it would be asar if it's part of the original loan documents. Then it would certainly be asar. But according to the opinion that it says that it's only asar if it's part of the loan documents, aval hivo. But if he just loaned it and it wasn't stipulated in the original agreement documents of the loan, then it would not be us. It would be permitted. My tama, why would it be permitted? Even the mikor of live it's not because of this free rent. Is that the reason why he lent him the money? Less lamba, then there's no problem of rivers there. So that would be the difference between the two languages of Rav Yosef in the name of Rav Nachman. Now the Gemara continues with a story, and we'll stop in a minute and a half. The Gemara says Rav Yosef bar Chama, he was a lender. And people owed him money and they didn't pay him. So Tokif be'avde denoshi demasad behizuze, he grabbed a hold of the goyish slaves of people who owed him money. Va'avid be'ividita, and he worked with them. He made them do work. You want your slave back? He's working for me now. Amalei Rava. So does that look like ribis? Amalei Rava berei. Amalei Rava berei. His Rava, his son said, "My tama avid marhachi." Dad, why are you doing something like that? Amalei. So Rav Yosef said, Anon Rav Nachman. I hold like Rav Nachman that grabbing somebody's slave and working with them, I'm not even benefiting money. I'm saving them extra money. Actually, they're a loss to me. Rav Nachman, a slave is not worth the food that you give him. In other words, it costs you more to have a slave, and therefore, I'm supplying the food for their slaves, and I'm saving them the general loss of holding on to this slave. So I'm not really taking anything from them. If anything, I'm saving those people money. But I just want to make a statement. I'm around. You owe me money. Amalei. So his son said to him, Amar Rav Nachman. When did Rav Nachman say that most slaves are worthless? Kegoin Dari Avdi. Rav Nachman, his experience was he had a slave that was very bad. The Marakabe Kuchi, he drank around and he was a drunkard. But achrina miyama, but there's some good, very good slaves. And then, in other words, you're benefiting by stealing somebody else's slave. Not every slave is not worth, is a loss more than a gain. Amalei, so Rav Yosef said, so then he told his son, I hold like Rav Daniel bar Katina. The Amar, who said, if you grab your slave of your friend and you worked it with that slave potter. Why? Because I'm doing the nichale. We go to Amud Aleph Samach Gimel. Most people want their slaves to constantly be working so that they don't become lazy. So therefore, basically, Rav Yosef said, I did the people who owe me money favors by grabbing their slaves and forcing them to work. And therefore, I'm not causing them a loss. It's actually they want me to do that, because if they don't want their slaves to become accustomed to not working. So his son said to his father, you're doing wrong. Only you're allowed to do that to a stranger's slave because he doesn't owe you money. But dad, since these people who own these slaves owe you money, it looks like ribis. You lent them money, and now they're letting you use their slaves. The Amar of Yosef bar Menumah of Nachman, once you have a relationship of a lender-borrower relationship, if you lend him money, then you can't stay in his courtyard because it looks like ribis. So his son told him that, Dad, you're doing wrong because you actually lent these people money, and now you're grabbing their slaves, and it looks like you're benefiting from their slaves as an extra reward for lending them the money, and that shouldn't be done. Even though you can work your way around it, that you're not doing anything wrong. So the father heard what his son said, and he said, Amalei, Hadri B, you're right, I regret what I've done, and I'm going to return the slaves. So, okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished Daf Samach Dalet in Bava Metzia.